2022. This meeting is being video recorded. Before we start, I'd like to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, on tonight's agenda, we have the EMA department. Mr. Jerry Bergeron, the director, is here to present his budget, and Mr. Kelly is also going to give us an update on the Board of Selectmen budget after Mr. Bergeron. So the floor is yours, Mr. Bergeron.
No? What do you need for questions, sir?
What do you got to tell us? Anything?
Budget's been more or less been level budgeting almost every year.
Okay.
I mean, there's things that beyond my control, internet, energy, things like that.
Right.
But otherwise than that, the only thing that I was asking for is an extra $500 for the salary staff. And the reason for that is the deputy director does a lot of work over the years. And within the last, I'm gonna say 10 years plus, this town has received through him and myself grants. It's called an EMPG grant, which got a lot of equipment for this town. We've collected over $50,000 to $60,000 worth of grants for this town, which never cost the town anything. All we had to do at the town was match the grant of what it was gonna be. It was $3,500 a year that we got, because MEMA breaks it down into cities and towns for the population and how much money you're gonna get. And it was also CERT grants. So we used to get 2 grants a year, and that was like $2,700. That MEMA did away with the CERT grants, and that was public safety things. But the deputy director and myself wrote a lot of grants over the years, which never cost the town anything. So I'm thinking he's worth a lot more than that, just in grants that he's gotten over the years for this town. And then, like I said, it's $50,000 plus that we've gotten over the years in town here. That was free money for us. That we had to do a little bit of work to go after the grant. We got it, and obviously the rest of the members, they volunteer their services. Apple Beach Festival Parade, the car shows, there's a lot of things that this town gets for their dollar for nothing through the EMA. And we're one of the smallest budgets. $17,000 for the budget for a year. That's kind of a small budget to run a building, 4 vehicles, pay the electric, and everything else that needs to be paid in the building. I just put an article in. Mr. Kelly should be getting it together for town meeting warrant. It took me 8 years for them to put gas to the building. We had it on oil. That burner is about 30 years old, 25 years old. It's a hot-end furnace. It's rotting out. I put in for a whole new burner system, a whole new system in there for the building. And now it's going to be on natural gas, because when they were doing the projects in town, they wanted to use our parking lot, our property, for storing their materials when they were doing the gas projects. I was able to make a deal with them to put gas to the building. And they were able to put gas to the building. So we now, instead of using propane to run our generators, we're using natural gas.
That's a good thing.
He convinced the gas company that it was essential for their safety that he have access to gas. He didn't make a deal.
The other thing was I shouldn't be saying this, but the other thing was we can't do it. It's going to cost us this, and it'll cost the town $10,000 to put it in. Blah blah blah. I said, well, okay, we can work this out. You want to store your material on town property? We'll charge you $10,000.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should leave that.
Yeah,
Leave that alone.
but I got it done. And the building is now under natural gas. We can get rid of oil finally. and hopefully town meeting approves our new printer. Springtime, the tower will go in, and that'll be in connection with the communications with MEMA, National Weather Service, in the events of storms. It'll be able to do the internet connections from the town hall to the building and everything else, because we'll be able to put that all up on the tower, so. That's my budget. I mean, I'm putting it in for this year.
Okay, it looks pretty good. Hopefully we have natural gas for many more years.
Well, a lot better than paying that than right now than the oil price.
That's right. That's right.
How much is that burner gonna go, how much is the gas burner gonna be?
16.
16.
16,000?
That and
That's installed.
associated ductwork.
Excuse me, sir?
That, the burner and associated ductwork.
Okay, completely installed.
They're gonna include air?
Yes, it's going to include air conditioning also, because we have a lot of
Electronics.
It's an emergency heating.
we have a lot of electronics in there,
Yeah.
backup systems and everything else that needs air conditioning.
And it's a backup heating and cooling station.
It'd be a combination. It's a lot cheaper to do it that way now than coming back for more money afterwards.
Right. Agreed. Does anybody have any other questions for Mr. Bergeron while he's here?
I just wish all the budgets were this easy.
Right. Well, I appreciate you coming in tonight, presenting the budget. Looks good. And we're not going to vote on any budgets tonight. If we have any questions, which I don't think we will, we'll reach out. But once again, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, next on the agenda is our town administrator, Mr. Kelly, to give us an update on budgets, see where we're at present time.
Mr. Chairman, you have a memo from me that describes the methodology of how I did the budget. Public sector budgeting is a little different than zero-based private sector. You use the previous 2 years' budget that's been approved as one baseline, and you use the past 2 years' revenue reports to the Commonwealth as another baseline. One baseline for expenditures, one baseline for revenue. And then the easiest way to do the budget is see the increase in revenue and the increase in expenditures and bring them down so they both match. And then you've got a balanced budget. And going through some exercises and looking at the original asks by the various departments and the revenue, the asks totaled $1,664,131, and the revenue estimates were $1,322,705, for a difference of $341,426. The Acushnet school budget increased by $569,041. Old Colony increased by $172,823, for a total education increase of $741,864. Now, folks have to realize that the Acushnet school budget includes their retirement of debt, both principal and interest, for this year, as well as assessments from Bristol County Agricultural High School and tuition assessments from Fairhaven and New Bedford High Schools, and associated transportation costs. So there are a number of parts of the Acushnet School Department budget that they do not have control over. They are assessments from other entities. And I am going to suggest to this committee that in the future, you break that out. So like Old Colony, you will have Bristol County Agricultural High School as a broken out line. You'll have the high school tuition as a broken out line. And I'm advising that the school debt be put with the town debt in the debt section of the budget, because it's all part of the town's mortgage, so to speak. So you might as well put it one place so you know exactly how much you're borrowing and what you're paying back. I think it'd be a little easier for the public to read and understand that.
I agree.
Easy for us also.
It's just a formatting change for the budget, but it's transparency.
Cleaner.
Yeah.
Those 3 words.
Originally, the joint accounts, which are pension and insurances, the increase was $460,728. And the increase in the town department's various budgets were $461,539. I've given you a background on page 2 of the memo of the major increases in the town and what that entails. Also, in the back of the packet, there's a spreadsheet that shows all of the budget with the differences. The board, the committee should know that in last night's meeting, the Board of Selectmen voted no design plan changes for the insurance. One of the rationale for that was it would cost a little more for this next upcoming year. But you're not restricted from going out on an RFP then. And so you can go out on an RFP, test the marketplace, see if you can get a better price somewhere else rather than being locked in for 2 to 3 years before you can actually test the marketplace. Because you haven't been out on an RFP in health insurance in 5 years. You haven't been out in an RFP in legal services in 10. You haven't been out in an RFP in auditing services in 5. You've never been out for an RFP for engineering services. And I'm trying to think if I missed one. I'm sure I did. Oh, regular insurance, you haven't been out in a long time for an RFP with that either, 5 to 6 years. And best practice in municipal finance is 3 to 4 years. So we'll be going out with, my advice to the selectmen is to go out for RFPs or RFQs and all of those services.
So with that, would we try to become like part of a collaborative again?
Well, let's see who would bid, for health insurance, would see who would bid. You could always use the GIC, which is the municipal pool that the state runs. There's Maya, which is the big dog. Then there's another one that is coming in from out of state that is actually a better plan for your retirees and is typical with Maya for savings. And then there's some smaller group purchasing. And as crazy as it sounds, even though Maya is Blue Cross Blue Shield, Blue Cross Blue Shield will bid if you go out for an RFP. Usually Maya does better than Blue Cross, even though it's the same product, because the pool's larger. But after we consulted, the board made that decision, we consulted with our health insurance consultants, NFP. We spent about an hour with them, and we went through and drilled down every which way possible. And that includes looking at the savings that we could accrue this year, looking at the population of subscribers, and it was my recommendation to the board that from the original budget, we cut 213,000. And so that would bring the 341,426 down, and then the selectmen told me to cut approximately 4,000 out of their budget. And so that's how we got down to 124,000 without doing any other cuts at this point. And without realigning our revenues, because of the state aid figures are traditionally so much lower that the government gives than the legislature. So I'm confident the budget's going to be balanced now, and that's before the selectmen actually go in to look at the police budget, where you have, the increase was 198,310. But that includes money for the cadets and the academy, as well as some other issues that the chief wanted to fix.
We have some vehicles in there too, right? That needed to be updated?
Yeah, but the vehicles are part of the standard rotation. And it's been a good business practice for the last 10 years that the vehicles are paid for out of the operating budget, not the capital budget, because you don't keep a police vehicle more than a couple of years. Fire was an increase of 23,000 and change. DPW was an increase of 104,000 and change. So I think when we go into those three, we'll hopefully find some savings and be able to pare it down even more. Do you want to go through the individual budgets, or do you want to look at the last page attached to the memo and tell me which ones you'd like to look at? Because the selectmen made the decision last night that if there was no increase, they definitely didn't want to bother with the budgets. If as far as looking at them at this point, if we need to in the future, but some of them are standard. And then there are explanations for a number of them. For example, the accountant's budget went up 11,934, but 10,000 of that is the increase in the audit. And that will be something we're going out for an RFP on. but you're already on the hook for this year with the audit, so they've increased from 29 to 39,000. Treasurer collector, you've got an increase of 13,000 and change, but 10,000 of that is professional development. You have a brand new treasurer, and you have a brand new assistant treasurer. To comply with DOR's regulations, they have to be certified within 3 to 5 years. And so you're gonna need the $10,000 that was put in for professional development to have them go through the various courses to get that certification. Because if you don't have your certified accountants and your certified treasurer collectors, DOR isn't gonna be certifying your accounts. Another increase that you see would be the Board of Health, but as you know, you've already done the reserve transfer for this year for the public health nurses, and the increase of 13,000 for next year for the public health nurses is expected. COA has an increase of a part-time outreach worker. And that's, part of it is to go take care of the elder services program, as well as do other outreach work. But as you can see, the budget busters are your education and your joint accounts. This budget is a very tight budget.
They usually always are.
I mean, the one thing, I think, timing-wise,
And this is,
the discussion has to be had with the police chief is when the officers he expects to lose are departing, and when the new ones are coming in and can get into the academy. Because you don't have part-time officers anymore under police reform that can go through have gone through the academy and can step in with just minimal training and ride for 6 months with someone like you've had in the past.
I have a question. I know with regards to the revenue, I know you adjusted some of the increases, right? The projections, you elevated them.
You want me to
Now,
go through that?
I know this, well, this was something Sue brought up last week, and I think you had some concerns with that, right?
Well, I think that's one of the things we started talking about, like when you raise the revenues to be more in line with what they actually are, you get 1 year of cushion with regards to that, right? We're not gonna get that extra bump in revenue for next year or future years. So it's the way I look at it, like a one-time adjustment, right? If we're using that to balance the budget.
It's an adjustment for this year.
Yeah,
Part of the reason you've had exorbitant free cash,
it's because the revenues are off.
because the revenues are off. And also, part of the reason you've been able in the past to balance extreme overtime costs that aren't included in the budget.
So I guess the concern that I have, right? If part of that extra cash that we have at the end of the year also goes to fund these capital expenditures that people have. And so if we're running a budget that really does closely mirror the revenue, and our operating budget matches that, we're not gonna have this surplus that we've had in the past to then go out and buy the equipment and to do all those major things that we've done before, cover the shortage in snow removal. So those capital expenditures that people have gotten accustomed to being able to fund afterwards. Does that make sense? That's where my concern is coming from. So either think of like a household. I don't run my household, so I spend every penny that I make to cover food and power and do whatever I want. I save some of that money to then pay for a roof repair that I'm gonna need and all of those things. So I guess I'm thinking about it kind of the same way. And the extra, which I totally acknowledge, the extra that we have in the revenue every year has always been that cushion, right? That's how we got there. So how do we get there now if we're all of a sudden gonna make revenue equal a more realistic number unless we start setting cash aside for those items?
First of all, the cushion that I, for a terminology, that I ate into,
Mhm.
I only ate into about 30% of your cushion.
Okay.
That's number one. And number two, I've used, as we go on and we can look on the warrant, there are other issues involved in your stabilization funds, and I've created a number of new stabilization funds.
Yeah, so that.
Drilling down into this, I also looked at various revenue figures and projections here. Some of them went down when we drilled into them, but they should turn around with good business practice. For example, if you look at the revenue estimate, the investment income went from 13,500 to 5,000. And in your earlier audits, it was as high as 25,000. Down in the,
I'm sorry, so why is our investment income going, why is it only 5? I'm thinking somebody could manage that money a little bit better. We're gonna put it in a short-term CD. We can get more than that.
This is not your big investment portfolio.
Yeah.
But turns out that the assistant town accountant and the treasurer collector and I noticed this, and we started to drill down. And the bank you're using, even though the account will have upwards of $1 million in it, you're getting, the way the account was set up, you're getting interest on $180,000, and the interest is 0.3%. All I can say is the bank had a very favorable status with this town.
It seems a little low to me.
It is.
Oh, is it? No.
You capped it out.
So, the treasurer collector is going to be discussing with various banks who we should do business with.
Seems to make sense to me.
Yes. The motor vehicle, you're averaging $1.7 million, $1.8 million right now for excise. Part of the problem with underestimating some of these amounts is when you get too low, DOR will ding your free cash just because they think you're
Trying to,
playing a
Yeah.
shell game.
I fully understand and why we would do this, to more accurately represent. I don't have an issue with that. All I'm saying is, people have got to understand what this means at the end of the day. Because I struggle with looking at things in 1-year snapshots and not thinking about it at least a few years down the road and understanding what that means. Because just because it can work this year means it might not work next year. And I don't know that it makes sense to create a budget that only works for 1 year.
Oh, this will work for multiple years. Now, the other issue is, if you're worried about the free cash decreasing because of this, that should balance, the changes here should be balanced out in the changes you'll get when you do the RFPs and you go out and you actually do competitive bidding in health insurance and those other things.
I agree. Some of those items in the next year when we go around should automatically come down. And that will
And
help.
the savings there will accrue to free cash.
Right.
So what you're doing is making sure, and when I talk about some of the articles, you're making sure that you do not get a management letter from an audit firm or a bond rating house.
That puts us below anything below AAA.
And you do not have DOR coming in and going over things.
What is our bond rating?
I think it's AA plus, isn't it?
Okay.
But when we get into the articles, I'll discuss where you've been too good in one instance that you might end up, you'd get dinged for being too good.
All right, so let's be bad.
It's
easy to do.
I agree with you as far as some of the adjustments, but some were very minor.
And again, I fully understand and comprehend, and it's just a matter of making sure that, we look at last year's free cash and we were able to do a lot of good things for the town, okay? And it's a matter of everything will go great in April, what happens in October? And maybe it's just because
I would say whoever is the town administrator in October will be coming to town meeting, trying to make sure where the increases in state aid go. Now, the other thing you also have to understand is if you underexpend, the discretionary formulas for the state, not you've got a minimum for students.
Mhm.
You've got a minimum that comes in because of the lottery and UGAA. But if you're underexpending, the state takes note of it and will ding your discretionary state aid because of it. Because the state's formulas are all slanted towards poorer communities and urban communities versus small towns.
Mhm.
And so you've got to walk
The fine,
between those
fully
two
understand what it is.
stanchions.
The thing that I don't understand is, this was years ago, but I remember looking and I was able to find something that said the median and mean income for the town was $50,000. That was the median and the mean. So half of the people made more than that, half of the people made less than that, right? And the average worked out that way. That's not a lot of money. So I don't know.
How long ago was this?
It's, remember when we were going through the Board of Selectmen stipends? That's when I found it.
It was 50?
50, 52-ish, 53-ish.
That seems kind of low.
But that's what the,
People affording these McMansions up out there.
huh? Well, that was before the, but the thing is, okay, like, how many of us make more than that? That means there's corresponding how many people
Making
that
less.
making less than that, to bring that average into, you know?
And the other problem you've got is you don't have a lot of targeted populations in this town that are targeted for extra money from the state. You know, it's McDuffie in education and some of the changes in the formula from Speaker Finneran on have targeted it to certain populations, certain cities, lower income areas, economic justice areas. The formula prior to McDuffie and the Finneran years was a lot simpler. And I would say if those formulas were still in place, you'd be getting a lot more state aid. And I agree with you, you can't play a lot, but you are almost half in the estimate of new growth with what you've been averaging.
And that I fully understand, Justin.
You're at 60%-ish for your excise tax estimate.
Well, there aren't gonna be too many new cars for people to buy, so that might not.
Yeah, but you don't, as you know, there's a floor there that you don't go below.
Right.
You also have an overlay that is very well stocked, that wasn't even considered here,
How much sits in that?
about 800.
I think we've always took a conservative approach here on the Finance Committee over the last, as long as I've been here, 16 years. And, to understand that we have to live within the constraints of Proposition 2.5. And we don't want to get into the situation where we're asking residents for an override and additional taxes to cover operating expenses or to cover capital expenditures. There's no way we should be going down that road. But
I agree with you.
But looking at the big picture, there's going to be a problem at some point if changes aren't made at the state level with regards to pension reform and some other things.
Well, as far as pension goes, you've got a window of about 12 years. I believe it's either 2033, 2034, 2035. I'd have to refresh myself because I know they changed it by a year. For all of the public employee pensions have to be self-funded. So your funding there will start to go down. The problem you've got right now with your pension system is you're making up for their losses and you're getting hit with the surcharge, right now because they know they have to get to a certain level by then.
So going back to what you said about self-funded, so self-funded meaning that the person that's getting the pension is gonna be funding it, not,
Yes,
you know,
Okay.
not the general public in the
Yes.
town of Acushnet. who
Yes.
isn't- You know, there might be, there's many residents who aren't getting a typical state pension. They
correct.
work in the private sector. You know, is that individual gonna be contributing to,
It's the reform law that was passed that created PERAC has a drop dead date, and I would say it's at that point.
So is that employees starting after that date have to start funding their own pension, or is anyone retiring after that date?
That's why you have had employees, let's say, that are paying 11% right now,
Yeah.
plus another 2% in surcharges.
Okay.
The elephant in the room isn't the pension system. The elephant in the room is OPEB.
that's actually tied in with the pension system, isn't it?
That's health insurance.
Oh, it's, you can kind of lump the two together because it has to do with basically a retiree's benefits, right?
But you have to remember that the retiree benefits for anyone who has been working in the modern era and reaches 65 is just the wraparound policy.
Mhm.
Right now, your OPEB is really at the level it is because for years, there are a number of people in the public sector that were not contributing to Medicare. And so you've got those in the pool,
Mhm.
and then you also have the retirees that retire at 55.
Well, and isn't this the reason why OPEB was created in the first place, was because the pension system, the way it was set up, was basically set up to fail at some point, where it wasn't gonna be able to continue to fund itself. So they had to create another way of,
Correct.
basically almost like it's like taxing people more, in a way.
It was, up until recently, it was pay as you go.
Mm-hmm.
Your OPEB liability was pay as you go. You looked at what your OPEB liability was for that year, you factored it in, and that was it. Then you had the GASB reforms, where you had to put it on your balance sheet. And then the rating agency said, oh. And so you had to show some plan to put a trust fund in place to take care of your OPEB liabilities. Not to sound heartless, but as all of those folks pass on, your OPEB liability is going to go down. It won't disappear, but it'll go down because all those folks who didn't contribute to Medicare, when they pass on, you're not going to be hit with their complete insurance. You're only going to be hit with your retirees on the wraparound.
Okay, so once you hit Medicare age that you can get Medicare insurance, then all we're responsible for is their gap insurance.
Yep. But prior to maybe 15 years ago, most public sector folks weren't on Medicare. Or maybe it was 20 years ago. I still think I have dark hair.
I probably had some here at that point.
But I agree with you, you've got to look at almost a 5-year window. And you've got to plan for your savings accounts, you've got to plan for your infrastructure accounts, your OPEB.
I mean, one of the things that we had talked about not too long ago was the fact that the water lines, right, are very old. We have to think about replacing those. That's significant costs. Like, these,
We did that environmental impact study, right, several years ago.
You've got
Study sewerage throughout the town.
you've got
Right.
3 lines you've got to be concerned about. You've got to be concerned about your water lines.
right,
You've got to be concerned about your sewer lines. And you've got to be concerned about your stormwater lines. And none of them can cross over. And there are ways you can deal with all 3. There are a number of grant programs you can deal with. The Commonwealth has recognized it, and you can access monies, as well as you're going to have to spend your own, but your infrastructure is
yeah.
something that has to be addressed.
So are we doing what's necessary to get the grant money so we can figure out when is the right timing for all of this? Because I'd rather fix it before it blows and we're paying emergency costs to repair a water line for 3/4 of the town.
You're asking that question of the guy who's only been here 5 weeks.
I understand that. So in other words, I'm asking, is this something you can look at?
It's a question for next week. Give them another week, we'll get there.
But when we get into the articles, you see what I've started.
Well, given that you found the issue with the, was it the stormwater drain, right, the brain is thinking, all those things we've talked about over the years that we're gonna need to do, you're like, is it? whose
I've
radar
addressed them
screen is it
other
on?
places.
Okay.
And I had an MS4 issue in a previous town that my annual charge for MS4 and water, stormwater systems, just the engineering was $200,000 to $400,000 a year.
And that story is what scared me to death.
But you can solve those problems.
As long as we remember to solve for them, is all I'm saying. We gotta remember to take
Exactly. I mean, I
action.
think with these kind of issues, I think, we have to be proactive instead of reactive.
Exactly.
Because if you have to react to something that's already happened, that's usually going to be too late, and it's going to be a big disaster.
Since we've segued into this, let's go look at the warrant in the memo, the warrant section. It's the 3rd page, I think. Yes. Back of the envelope, free cash is about $1.8 million. But we won't know until we see this certified free cash. He came late to the dance. Where, books should be closed December, Schedule A filed in January. You've got a brand new town accountant that just started.
So when do you think we'll have a certified number?
I figure it's between now and April 15th, you'll have a certified number. Yeah, I would hope it would be before April 1. I'm recommending to town, through you and the selectmen to town meeting, that you create 3 new stabilization accounts. You don't want to continue to deal with spikes in health insurance down the road. I'm not saying you put as much money as you put in a general stabilization, but you need a specific stabilization account. And
It's like the Christmas Club account. Right.
and I'm suggesting that you put $200,000 in it from free cash. I'm also suggesting that you create an accrued liabilities for compensated absence, which is a fancy legal way of saying buyouts.
Yeah.
And you put 50,000 in and you replenish it year to year as you see it happen, because at some point you're going to have a retirement bubble. And when you do, you don't want to have to take it out of the operating budget. I also suggest for 2 reasons, you have a stormwater systems improvement MS4 compliance stabilization fund. The first reason is that'll start your savings account for your stormwater repair, maintenance, engineering. The second reason is there's something called the Clean Water Fund at the state. The Clean Water Fund allows you to borrow for stormwater repairs and engineering up to $500,000. 0 interest, 5 years to pay. But you need a dedicated stormwater account to accept the money from the state and put it in. So this creates that type of account.
How much were you suggesting to put in there?
$50,000 right now. And then, once you look at the big picture and you come up with your 5-year plan, then you can figure out, and you can go back to the Clean Water Fund multiple times.
So how is the Board of Selectmen with?
They like the ideas.
Okay.
I'm also suggesting that you put $350,000 in your general stabilization account. Now, you guys have been very, very good with your stabilization account. But you're getting to the border where you're starting to be bad, because you've got too much in the account. The bond houses want to see a minimum of 4%.
Yeah.
When you get to 10 to 15% of your budget, they think you're playing shell games with your finances. You're up around 10% right now with your general stabilization account. The bond houses don't care if you have other stabilization accounts that are dedicated to certain things and you put money in them. They don't add them all together. They just, because general stabilization can be used for anything and is not a specific account, they look at it when you get up between the 10, 15% and above as a slush fund.
Yeah, but I mean,
So,
they should, I would think of looking at it in another way, like we're being trying to be more responsible just in case something major happens in town.
but what would major events be? Infrastructure repair?
Yeah.
More than likely.
Sewer lines.
Yeah.
Sewer
Yeah,
lines?
sewer
Major,
Stormwater lines?
right.
So you put it in other accounts.
You create the other
That's
accounts.
that's the thing, that's exactly it, right. So if we do things, what if capital expenditure, a capital expense stabilization fund, those are the things, yes, that make sense. So we
So
can
you-
cap the general and just put the things aside. I mean, I know we can't pay off debt because it's bonds,
Right.
right? Because the other option is to just pay off some of the debt and save some money on the interest.
Well,
Because
you-
clearly, we're not making it in in the investment income.
Well, but you are with this account is invested.
That is, yes, that account. I'm
and-
talking about the one that gives us the 0.3%.
Yeah, but this account is invested and is invested well. You've got your OPEB account, which I've suggested putting money into.
How much you suggesting to put in OPEB is?
400,000?
400,000, I believe.
Yeah.
All right, so when we,
That brings you close to $1 million in OPEB.
all right, and then what about in the capital expense stabilization fund?
250,000.
Okay, so if we add all these numbers up, we estimating about 1.8 in free cash, right?
Well, that includes the capital expenditures too. The total, when I did it all together, is for the capital expenditures, putting money in all the stabilizations, and putting the $20,000 for the elderly service program out of free cash. My total cost out of free cash is $1,821,900.
So we would be using all that money to fund all these new stabilization funds and whatever capital expenditures we have. Okay.
And there's a list of the capital expenditures. You gotta remember, that doesn't include your enterprise funds, where you also have, especially for sewer and water, you have some sources of money to repair infrastructure.
So something like the capital expense stabilization fund could be a revenue source for, say, Oak Colony, where there might be an ask there. Would we be able to do that, or does it need to go to bond?
Or, well, they have to bond.
Oak Colony would have to bond, and
But-
it'd be part of
We'd
their
have
annual
we'd have an
budget.
obligation.
We'd
as a
have an
town.
obligation to fund it, the annual
But you
cost.
could even create a stabilization fund just for that.
But given that we're just one of how many communities, does it have to be, will that work if we're the only ones kind of using a different revenue source?
You put it in if you're putting, let's say, free cash in a stabilization account, it's starting next year, let's say.
Right.
And you've got, and it's for, I'd sit with town council if it was me, and we'd come up with wording, so it's allowed by DOR.
Okay.
And it will be multiple years before you're going to have to pay on their debt. You have to open the building before you start to pay on the bonds.
Okay. So we, in theory.
Now, there
could
might
take-
be some bands in between, which were short-term notes, but the bonds itself,
Mhm.
you have to wait until the building opens before you get the bonds.
But we, in theory, could create this account, and then when our, the Acushnet portion grows substantially because we have to pay our portion of the bond, we could use the stabilization to kind of bridge.
Yes.
What that, okay, so
Yes.
we
It's
don't
a-
have to work.
It's a savings
Yeah,
account.
I totally am, I'm on board with that.
And you can phrase it so it's not so specific, if you want, that it could be for
Any school.
educational infrastructure.
I don't know, you might want to be specific where we seem to have one portion of education that feels like they're entitled to a lion's share. No.
You could do it however so. You could do it for assessment-based educational. And
I
I'm
think you
just,
could write it however
I'm
is
just-
going to
I'm
make
just-
sense.
I'm
My
just,
thought is you have,
Yes.
better to have 3 smaller accounts specified than one that can be
I'm
utilized by one.
spitballing here.
Yeah.
I'd have
Yeah.
to sit with town council.
I think we understand the concept of it,
So you folks know, we've created a infrastructure development team of the town planner, the town administrator, and the DPW director, with the stormwater agent as, those are the three senior, stormwater agent, police chief, fire chief, and the business manager, assistant, whatever, at the DPW. And number one, its job is to make sure the master plan is updated. You don't need a new one, you just need an updated one. The reason you need an updated one is without an updated one, you can't apply for grants. And you've got to target the grants, you've got to target your needs, and you should have a 5 and a 10-year infrastructure plan in place that is a living document that changes as you go through it.
Like I say, I like this. This is
Yeah.
some good stuff. I think it's responsible budgeting.
It's best practices.
I think it's responsible spending, what we're seeing at our local level. And, this should set an example for our federal government, which is printing and spending money like it's going out of style, and has put us in our current inflationary status that we're in right now. So we're not going to follow them.
Quickly run through the capital items?
Yes, please.
Public Works is looking for a 10-wheel sander plow truck, $280,000. I will get the description from Dan, but I wanted him to wait for when Kathy gets back so we can make sure it's a proper description. The slide-in sander for 50, and so he can use snowplow truck 16 for sanding as well as plowing. The 24 less lethal for the police equipment is because the other ones are out of date. That's a liability issue. 9,500 is to keep going with the update of the technology in the police station. School roof preventive maintenance is 15, and repair and installation of the new surface to the parking lots is 45. You've started the work in the parking lots, but you need to finish it, or the work you've done will
That's
just...
the new lot, right, that they added, they want to put a skim coat on it, yeah.
And the school roof is a continuation. There is money in a previous article that is going to contribute to this too. You heard about the EMA building with their boiler. The one they got now is failing. This one is also natural gas. It's help you with your green community stuff.
Somebody wants to bring gas to Fairway Drive, I mean, I can.
Yeah, me too.
The breathing apparatus, I've talked to the fire chief, he and I are in discussion, he's applied for a grant. We're also looking at potential other funding sources. So, but we put in the 320 from the ambulance receipt fund just as a placeholder, so you know. The historical committee put in a number of requests for CPC funds, and the park and recreation put in a $20,000 request. I do not know if CPC is met yet. It hadn't as of Monday, but I've been a little busy with the selectmen's meeting yesterday and you folks today.
We put money into Perry Hill Church, nobody uses it. Okay. That's $42,000.
That, you've already put money into
So a lot of
it.
money been put into that already.
Tons of money into
So
that.
once we went down that road, you really couldn't.
But I think the determination was we can't use it anyways, because it's not handicapped accessible.
I thought that they were gonna try and use it for certain things,
Right.
certain types of venues.
I'm not sure how many you
There's no
can
restrooms
because,
there, there's no.
because of the, yeah, there's no restrooms.
You can't
but-
use it, it's a
Yeah,
shell, basically.
Basically,
you
yeah.
probably could use it for minimal events. You might be able to use it for town events. More importantly, it's the selectmen have begun discussions, and I've got to do some research and talk to the library director, because more importantly, you've got a building right there down the street that you've got to figure out what you're going to do with it, and
Russell Memorial.
whether you market it, and if you market it, where the money goes. Does it have to go back to the library, or does it go to the town, or what? And that's some research I've got to do over after town meeting.
The town does, I would assume it goes back to the town, right?
That's what
It depends on when the original funding came, and whether
So
it's
did it come from the
legacies,
library? Okay.
et cetera.
General fund.
Yeah, because they have a gift account, I think,
Right.
right?
No, but it could, I don't know, was it a legacy? I know if it was a Conant library, it would have been a legacy.
It's a historical building.
I've no idea.
But you could market it with historical restrictions. That's not the issue. The issue is, if you market it, don't count on it going to the general fund. If there are restrictions on it, it might have to go to the library.
Mhm.
I was seeing Perkins just let this bottomless pit. You can't use it. That's my problem.
Well, hopefully this will,
Long plane.
be
I,
part of it, I think.
I recommended a couple reorganizations to the Board of Selectmen. One, for management at DPW, they suggested be a multi-year plan. For this office, the Board of Selectmen's office, they want me to first have the senior clerk replace, a full-time senior clerk replace the grant administrator, part-time administrative assistant, and then see as far as what goes on. You should not have your treasurer collector's office as your HR office. And that's what's happening now. Most of those HR functions, other than some functions involving benefits, should be in the Board of Selectmen Town Administrator's office. And that's one thing I'm recommending they move there. Recruitment should be centralized. Onboarding, exit interviews, all of those, writing job descriptions, all of that should be in that office. It should not be willy-nilly in the treasurer collector's office. And you do have a new assistant treasurer collector. And I think you're going to be very pleased with her. She is an expert in munis.
Yeah, I saw the meeting.
And she was the manager for the payroll of the New Bedford Fire Department. And since you're assistant treasurer collector, 2 to 2.5 days a week is spent on payroll. You got someone who can hit the job running and do it very well. And she's a local resident.
That's good.
So she's a taxpayer too.
Pays her own salary.
Any questions. I will communicate with the committee further if we see some other way we're going to make sure we balance the budget, have savings. I do not know if the board, if all three members of the Board of Selectmen are going to be available on the 23rd. If we have two members available, we will post the meeting, so we keep Mr. H off our back.
The agenda posted for it.
Huh?
The agenda posted for it today. And for the Board of Selectmen, Finance, and School Committee.
It was.
Yeah,
Who posted it?
the town, I got my alert.
I don't,
Oh, 2:30, 3 o'clock tomorrow night.
because I don't think the board posted it. They hadn't known if they were gonna have members
I
there.
think anytime there's an update, if you're on for the automatic alerts, it
Yeah,
gets
you
sent
just
to you
get
via
it.
email.
No, I mean that
Yeah.
we were discussing whether the board should post or not, so someone else posted it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I got the alert too.
Yeah.
Maybe the school committee posted it.
Oh, yeah, because when we have this meeting next week, we're all gonna open our meeting separately.
Of course, it's Board
Like,
of Selectmen.
the finance will open our meeting, and then the
Correct.
school, and then if the Board of Selectmen, what, if they have at least two members there, they'll open their meeting, correct?
Yep.
Really, the question,
Next week, you say?
next week, at the Ford Middle School Library. We'll bring that up in a minute. The only other question I had with regards to, like, our budget packets, are we gonna get, like, an updated version of this with all the updated budgets in it before we start our deliberations?
They had said last week we were gonna have it. I had thought it was gonna be this week, but she
I
did say.
thought so too, but
Yeah, but
Melissa is back tomorrow.
Right. So,
Can I approach? I just want to show you, which I've shown to some people. I've suggested for education. You break out Bristol Aggie, you break out the tuition, and then you have another section here with the total education line.
That would include Old Colony too.
Yep. And you take the debt out of the education.
has that been presented to the board in that way?
The Board of Selectmen, yeah, we've discussed it in concept. They wanted to see more than my
Yeah,
chicken scratching mock-up. And you put the debt, the school debt, in the debt section, because it's one
now
mortgage.
our school's aware of that as well?
It's, the budget and the format of the budget belongs to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. That's all we need to know. So they're receptive to the idea of
You're gonna have the 3 words
Take
on
you
it.
in, little like that.
You're gonna have them talk with.
Well, Mr. Kelly, thank you for providing us with all these updates and clarification. I think it's a lot of great information that you've provided us. And, since you've been here, and it hasn't been a long period of time,
It feels like a lifetime.
Wow, we've enjoyed our time
I thought it
together.
was
You
funny.
apparently have not.
I thought it was funny you keep talking about October and a new,
I think,
we're not gonna let you go anywhere.
I think you've done a great job to this point, and
I
we've been
appreciate it.
presented with some things that, in the past, we haven't seen it presented like this.
We haven't seen it presented,
No,
never mind like this.
so your knowledge is above and beyond, I think, some of, look, it's just, you're good.
But
I
it's
think you're
also
really good.
transparency, and it's a dialogue. If the boards and the professional staff have a dialogue, and the professional staff provides you with the information because you're the decision makers, you, the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and then through all of you to town meeting, if the town meeting is able to make educated decisions, then the town will run right.
Right, and the bottom line is, we want to be able to provide a responsible budget for our town residents and continue to provide good services as well. And, in our town, we have, a lot of people on fixed incomes, and a big portion of that population is the elderly population. I would hate to see them suffer and have to try and find out, well, how am I gonna come up with this extra money because we're having a tax override to cover this and that. I hope we never get in that situation. I don't wanna see it.
I'm gonna cost you some money if I'm still here this summer. Because in my former towns, I would host a hot dog event at the COA and invite all the folks that are of a certain age to come in, and we will brief them on what's available as far as abatements and how they can apply, when they need to apply, whether they're eligible or not, because I think it's one very important thing for the character of a town to keep your senior population in their homes.
Oh, because we have to remember, they were once a working, part of the working class in this town, and, contributed in a big way. And, you don't want to leave them behind or forget them in any way.
This year is going to be extremely difficult for the seniors on fixed incomes. And
With
just
the
put gas in their car. or-
Yeah,
with
With
inflation.
stagflation,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
But that's also why the senior program is important.
Mhm.
It helps folks with their property tax.
well, going back to like doing projects in town, hopefully we don't have a lot of major projects to do over the next couple of years, because I don't see this current inflationary status changing much over the next couple of years, unfortunately.
Your cost of pipes have doubled, and we don't even know yet what asphalt's gonna cost.
Mhm.
All those people complaining about potholes are gonna have to take a bumpy ride a little longer.
No, but you have to do it coordinated, and you have to coordinate it with the utilities so that you can make sure whatever section you're doing. I mean, Dan and I have had a discussion. You've got this great project going on that the Commonwealth's funding for $4+ million on the Hamlin Street Bridge, is it?
Mhm.
Well, the town should make sure and take care of any stormwater issues surrounding that area
Well, it's already being dug up.
before the project's finished,
Agreed.
as well as any piping, if there is any. And
Yep.
then the other issue that we started to look at, we've talked to Serpent, is you're gonna be an MBTA community very shortly. You've gotta have certain zoning changes.
2023, they said the station's opening, the end of 2023.
24, you'll probably be hit with an assessment. You've got the new multifamily or duplex zoning you've got to put in place as such. You've got to plan out what's going on. That's another reason you have to update your master plan. And that doesn't, I don't even know whether, just because you'd have to look at the crow fly, how far away you are from the two stations, whether 40R comes into play. And 40R is 40B, close to a transit hut. But you do get money from the state for 40R versus no money for 40B. But you want to make sure you've got teams working together in town government that are watching out for these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, to that point, our schools could be overcrowded, right? You get,
Mhm.
you know, and you're gonna have a huge class size, potentially in certain, so these are all things that we have to think of long-term, you know, that can impact the town.
And years ago, in my town, we went from one state rep to 3. And we were all bemoaning the fact. But then when we had 3 state reps, we had 3 votes on Beacon Hill.
Yeah.
And they were of different parties. So we get all 3 to go in. Well, now you have multiple state
We have
reps
3 now.
coming
too, right?
down.
Yeah.
And the question is, and I've already met with one of them, the question is how can you, and he's on Ways and Means. The question is how can you leverage that to get earmarks? You're not going to get it in state aid, but you can get it in earmarks where you can say, please put in an earmark for $150,000 to do all the engineering for the culverts in town. And if someone's on Ways and Means, a lot of times they can get that in. That's money you don't have to spend. And you can, so instead of using the 150 that you would have used for engineering, you put it in your infrastructure account and you use it for the actual reconstruction of the culverts. That's just one example. And of course, you've got small bridge and culvert grants that you can get too. But you have to be shovel ready.
I can think of one right off the top of my head on Main Street here. Right next to the Meadowbrook thing, that sharp turn, the guardrail's half gone and the road's caving in on one side. Yeah.
Every town has these needs. The important thing is to recognize what the needs are and then put a plan together and more importantly, put a timetable together to take care of those needs.
And once again, thank you. Does anybody have any old business that they want to bring up? Okay, under new business, we did have a couple of reserve fund transfers that came in today, so they weren't on the agenda. But we have the information in front of us, so if you folks want to take a look at it, you know, for next week, I believe they'll be put on the agenda for next week. Kathy, you got that? I don't know if she can hear me. You did? Okay.
Yep, I'll put them on for next week then.
Yeah, because I don't think these can wait 2 weeks, right? So yeah, we'll have to do this next week. Okay. Yeah, so one is from, it looks like EMA and the other one's from fire. And there's an explanation on both receipts, so we can take a look at it and be prepared to approve or disapprove when we meet next week. Okay, to that, so next meeting is next Wednesday, March 23rd. It's going to be a joint meeting with our school committee, school representatives, and perhaps the Board of Selectmen may also be there.
And hopefully, Melissa will get that whole thing out to you.
Yes, and yeah, and hopefully we'll have our updated packets with all the updated finalized budgets, so then the following week
The
of
big
March.
3 will not be finalized because the selectmen still want to work on them.
Okay,
Police, fire, DPW.
so but when we start our deliberations, I mean, if those 3 are not finalized, I guess we could maybe wait and hold those until the following week, if they would be finalized that following week.
They've got a meeting the 29th.
Okay, yeah, so that's probably what's gonna happen then. The ones that aren't finalized will hold until the following week, and everything that's finalized, we will vote on March 30th to get the majority of this done. And that'll include the articles too, that same night, so.
And we have a number of the articles in, but a couple of them are being looked at by town council to see if they're even legal.
Okay, so if there's any articles that are in question, then we'll hold those as well. And then save those for the following week, which we saved as a reserve date anyway.
We'll probably forward you folks a number of the articles, if not all of them, Monday-ish. Friday,
All the ones that are approved.
Friday, I'm going to a seminar sponsored by MMA, but it's the facilitators from the Mass Office of Administration and Finance, and it's all about ARPA and now that the federal rules are finalized and what you can do, what you can't do, and how you should do it. So any information that's written information, I'll grab and we'll pass it out to this board and the Board of Selectmen.
We used to get a publication from the MMA, a monthly publication. We haven't gotten it in a long time. I used to like it. I used to look forward to going through it. Reading it.
Are you a member of the Mass Municipal Finance Association, which is a subgroup of the MMA?
I thought our finance committee was.
Well, we'll have to check.
All right.
And
Yeah, let's check on
if
that.
not, then you should be,
Right.
because not only do they get that materials provided, but you get access to webinars and everything that is specifically for finance committees that really help.
I know you can probably get it online, but I like having it in hand and just, something about holding a piece of paper. I'm old school when it comes to that. All right, so that being said, I think we covered everything tonight.
Just a reminder, I am not here on April 6th. I'm
Okay,
away that week. So just, we want to make sure we have enough for a quorum.
yes, yeah, because you won't, because if there's some things that we haven't voted on, you won't be able to vote on those.
Right. I'm happy to give somebody my proxy, but I'm not sure if that's acceptable.
Well, there's still remote participation.
I won't have the opportunity to remote, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think we'll have, I'm sure Eric will be here. So long as Eric's here, yeah, because we're not missing anybody else tonight besides Eric, right? That's it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up because I know
Okay.
that 6 is when the big ones are coming across.
I will check with town council to see what your quorum number is now that you've got a
I think
vacancy.
we have a quorum right now, 5.
5 should, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if
Yeah,
because you have a vacancy, I don't know if
I think we have
Changes the
two.
quorum
Yeah, I think we
number.
have 2 vacancies.
you've got 2 vacancies.
Mhm.
If you have,
Well, one's.
No, Jackie's not technically.
Yeah, that
vacant.
one's not official, but I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah,
if
she
both
hasn't
were
been here for 2
official, I
years.
think definitely you'd have a reduced quorum number.
But she's
Well,
been
if
gone
we're-
for 2 years.
She's
We
been
haven't
gone,
seen her for
And she
2.
hasn't been sworn in to
Yeah.
to go
So
back.
is she even,
If she's not sworn in,
Mhm.
She hasn't been here in over 2 years.
no, but if she's not sworn in,
That's what we'd have to find out.
we don't know when she was
I will check with the
reappointed.
town
Yeah,
clerk.
because once you do your reappointment, and you're gonna accept another 2-3 years,
Term, yeah.
You have to be
you have
sworn.
to get sworn in. And then you have to also go through the online
Ethics.
conflict of interest.
Yeah. I'll check with the town clerk
Mhm.
because and town council because of the quorum issue.
Yeah, that would be good to know.
If I can't make the 6th, I will at least Zoom in if necessary. That's the only thing. I mean, it's
Okay.
10 days before the deadline is.
All right, so we'll just have to make sure we have the Zoom capability, which we should for that
Yeah.
meeting. And that way you can just, chime in with your vote.
Isn't the selectman talking about doing away with Zoom?
But it hasn't been acted upon yet.
Right, but it's, okay. Keep that in mind.
Next week will be at the school.
So, yeah, so just to reiterate,
It's voluntary, the
yes,
library.
next week we're at the Ford Middle School Library
Library.
for 7 o'clock.
Yes.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Good night.